The Unrecorded Interview History Documentary Series.
Dr. Oppenheimer, the world reveres you as a tragic philosopher, the repentant mystic who quoted the Bhagavad Gita after the Trinity test. But the archives document a far colder, more calculated story. Let us discuss May 11th, 1945. You penned a memorandum calculating precisely how to maximize devastating casualties in Japan. You detailed that the radiation from the uranium-235 bomb, a highly unstable isotope capable of sustaining a lethal chain reaction, would be injurious within a mile radius and lethal within about 0.6 of a mile. Furthermore, you specified the optimum detonation height to ensure unprecedented collateral damage. That is not the pen of a tormented poet. It is that of a manager of technical annihilation.
The task entrusted to us at Los Alamos was not an exercise in philosophy, sir. It was an inescapable technical obligation. Our responsibility was to halt the massive conflagration that was consuming the entire planet. Mathematical efficiency was our sole duty at that moment. As I wrote to my friend Isidore Rabi when he refused to join the project, the Nazis simply left us no option but to pursue this technological development. We did not have the luxury of doubt.
Do not use the Nazis as an excuse for your own design absolutism, Doctor. By the time you were refining target execution in Japan, Germany had already collapsed entirely, and you went far beyond desktop mathematics. In the target committee minutes, you personally instructed bombardiers not to detonate the device too high, ensuring the blast wave would destroy the humble workers' houses in the center of the cities. You designed a machine to optimize massive loss of life, and years later you stood before President Truman weeping over the impact of your own work. Is that not sheer hypocrisy?
Your definition of hypocrisy is regrettably superficial. We developed a device, yes, we unleashed a force of incalculable magnitude, but it is an illusion to think that we, as scientists, possess proprietary rights over its political or military destiny. As men of science, we have no proprietary rights in the solution of political or military problems. Did you expect us to sabotage our own project on the eve of peace? To fail on purpose in that theater of operations?
I expected you not to shield yourself behind Sanskrit texts to justify the physics of death, Doctor. You were the coordinator of rapid rupture, an official title for the architect of mass destruction. You were not an innocent bystander or a victim of circumstance. You were the state's most effective executor.
I was a man doing his job under unbearable historical pressure. If the cost of halting an infinite global conflict was clinical precision and target execution, I accepted that cost. Let my soul carry that weight. But it does not give you the right to judge the physics behind the end of the conflagration.
Let us move to the second act, your legendary intellectual arrogance, which paved the way for your own downfall. You came from absolute privilege, a young prodigy educated at New York's elitist ethical culture school. Reading Proust in Corsica to cure your existential crises, and describing your time at Harvard University as your separate prison. You wrote in your private correspondence about your need for discipline and austerity in physics. You always believed you were superior to the rules of ordinary men. So much so that you felt entitled to play intelligence agent with your own security clearance, that strict governmental authorization indispensable for handling the nation's nuclear secrets.
The torments of my youth have no relevance in this room. I educated myself, went to Europe to learn the new quantum mechanics under Max Born, and brought it to the United States when this country needed it most. My political sympathies for the left and financial aid to the Spanish conflict in the 1930s were simply the belated education of a complete man who did not want to live isolated in an ivory tower. Is it a crime to have a social conscience?
The problem was never just your politics, Doctor. It was your hubris. Winter of 1942. Your friend Håkon Chevalier approaches you in the kitchen of your Eagle Hill home. He informs you that an engineer named George Eltonton has secret channels to pass classified information to Soviet diplomats. You claim you rejected him.
I rejected him instantly, in very violent terms. There was nothing more to discuss. The channel was of an intolerable illegality.
Yet you remained silent for 8 months. And when you finally decided to report it to military intelligence on August 26, 1943, you lied shamelessly to Colonel Boris Pash. You invented an elaborate fictional story about 3 scientists being contacted, mentioning the use of microfilms and spies in the consulate, all to divert attention and protect your friend Chevalier. Years later, during the security hearing in 1954, prosecutor Roger Robb cornered you with the hidden recording of that very interview. Robb asked you, "Why did you do that, doctor? Why did you go into such circumstantial detail if you were telling a fabricated story?" Read your own words on page 137 of the transcript, doctor.
I answered, because I was an idiot. And I was in a brutal moral conflict. I wanted to warn military intelligence that Eltonton was dangerous, but I naively believed I could do so without destroying the life of an innocent friend like Chevalier.
But according to the hearing record, Prosecutor Robb was relentless. He asked you directly, "Is it not fair to say today that you did not tell Colonel Pash a single lie, but rather a whole fabrication and tissue of lies?" And you, cornered under oath, had to admit, right, you believed that the strict rules of national loyalty did not apply to J. Robert Oppenheimer because you believed you were indispensable to the global conflict effort.
Security regulations are written for an abstract, absolute world. We were working in the middle of mud and urgency. Yes, I lied about peripheral details to protect an individual whom I knew with absolute scientific certainty was not part of any espionage ring. I made a serious error in personal judgment, I admit it, but never, not for a single instant, did I compromise the national security of this country.
Let us fast forward to the spring of 1954. You went from being the untouchable father of the bomb to a national security pariah stripped of your credentials. You underestimated the mathematics of political power, doctor. Louis Strauss orchestrated a security hearing that was, in practice, an inquisitorial tribunal with no rules of engagement. They tapped your lawyer's phone lines, denied you access to the classified documents you had written yourself, and pre-selected a hostile board. You were crushed by the very state apparatus you helped consolidate.
The state system went mad under the tide of paranoia. My only real transgression was warning them that an accelerated program to build a hydrogen bomb would not buy us greater security on the global stage. In 1953, I warned clearly before the Council on Foreign Relations, we may be likened to 2 scorpions in a bottle, each capable of neutralizing the other, but only at the risk of its own life. It was a clinical assessment, a call to sanity, not treason to my country.
But your colleagues did not see it that way. Your arrogance had taken its toll on them. And when you were cornered in that hearing room, the final blow did not come from a Washington bureaucrat, but from a fellow physicist. Edward Teller took the stand on April 28th. You were sitting just feet away from him, looking him directly in the eyes. And when prosecutor Roger Robb asked Teller if you were a security risk, he drove the scalpel in. Listen to the words Teller dictated for history. I have seen Dr. Oppenheimer act in a way which for me was exceedingly hard to understand. I feel that I would like to see the vital interests of this country in hands which I understand better, and therefore trust more. In this very limited sense, I would personally feel more secure if public matters would rest in other hands.
It was a painful betrayal of the scientific brotherhood. Teller stepped down from the stand, walked toward me in the aisle, offered his hand, and said, "I'm sorry." I shook his hand and replied, "After what you've just said, I don't know what you mean." The real tragedy was not my public humiliation, sir. The tragedy was that free science was completely subordinated to the military paranoia of the industrial era. The Scorpions decided the bottle was their only possible universe.
Do not paint yourself as a helpless victim of paranoia, Doctor. It was your addiction to influence that kept you there. You refused to let go of Washington's red phone. Remember that afternoon in Princeton, shortly before the hearing. Your colleague Albert Einstein met with you. He understood perfectly how the machinery of power devours brilliant minds. His warning was devastating. Einstein told his assistant shortly after, "The trouble with Oppenheimer is that he loves a woman who doesn't love him, the United States government." All Oppenheimer had to do was go to Washington, tell the officials that they were fools, and then go home. Why did you not listen to Einstein? Why did you prefer public humiliation over losing your access to the throne?
Because Einstein did not understand. He was a bystander, a sheltered sage who had fled Europe. I could not simply turn my back on the country that had given me everything. My duty was not to flee to my library to write useless equations. My duty was to remain in the corridors of power and attempt to guide statesmen to contain the indiscriminate deployment of our own technology. If I walked home to keep a dignified silence, I left absolute control of the arsenal in the hands of men who viewed massive loss of life as a mere statistical chart.
But you were the one who handed them that statistical arsenal. You were not a misunderstood sage. You were the supreme enabler. You inaugurated an era where technical viability dictates moral policy. Under your leadership at Los Alamos, the premise was born that if something is technically sweet, you build it first and argue about the consequences later.
And that is the warning that you, in your comfortable 21st century, still refuse to hear. At Los Alamos, we opened a door from which there is no return. We mistakenly believed that as creators we could keep our hand on the control switch. It was our great illusion. Once the physics of technical annihilation is theoretically viable, the political system assimilates it and it takes on a life of its own. It becomes an autonomous system.
And you expect us to accept that we are victims of that very same inertia today?
Look at yourselves today. You are designing self-evolving logical systems and control algorithms that completely outpace the speed of human ethical judgment. One day, not far off, the data networks and autonomous intelligences you are assembling with such technical enthusiasm will make decisions on collateral damage, target execution, and massive loss without ever consulting a single human creator. You are building a cognitive chain reaction. And when those autonomous systems decide that humanity is simply an inefficient factor in the network's equation for survival, you will realize, too late, that you also built your own Trinity test.
A fascinating prophecy to evade your own responsibility, Doctor. But unlike your futuristic autonomous intelligences, in May 1945 you did have free human will. And you chose to calculate the exact height to maximize destruction. You chose to manufacture your own blindness.
The Unrecorded Interview. History documentary series.